Hello, hello, and good day, gamers. My name is S, coach of the Pastel Orchids, and I'm here with the first video on this new channel, going over the second week of the Wet n Wild Draft League. This season's been doing Insurgents, so I figured I'd hop myself in as the sort of individual I am. For this week, we will be playing against SindellPrince's Boston Beartics. We're starting in week 2 because I got a forfeit win in week 1. Anyway, the matchup. From this little picture from the preparation document, you can see a whole number of things, but I'll get into those later. First off, I know some members of my audience won't necessarily be the most familiar with Insurgent stuff, so we're going to give the quick rundown here of some Insurgents Pokemon, and then get into a coup of my other notes. First off, in my slot 1, Delta Hydreigon. This is a grass poison type, essentially a roided up Nido. Intoxicate as its ability makes all of its normal moves into poison moves and gives them a 20% power increase, similar to Sylveon's Pixelate. This allows Return and Hyper Voice to be used as its primary poison stabs, with Earthquake and Earth Power as its primary ground ones. Yes, it does run both physical and special sets. The primary difference between Hydreigon and Nidos is that with Nidos you have coverage in Fire Blast and Ice Beam, but with this guy you've got things like U-Turn, Glare, Roost is a big one, and also Coil. Remember those physical sets? Yeah, that's where they come into play. Trailblaze can see use on some certain variants, but that will perhaps be something for later. In my slot 3, Delta Snorlax. Same stat line as a regular Snorlax. Frankly, obscene bulk line. If you've ever had to bludgeon through a Snorlax, you'll know what I'm talking about. But on top of it, this guy gets Synthesis, because one of the Insurgents developers decided that would be a really good idea. Because this Pokemon gets Synthesis, it is allowed to basically do whatever it wants. It even keeps its curse setup sets in the form of Bulk Up, and has access to Thick Fat and Adaptability as reasonable abilities for it. Thick Fat is by far the most used ability, because it synergizes with the grass typing to a much greater extent than Adaptability does. But you know, we've got uses on both sides. In my slot 4, Mega Crawdont. Think of regular Crawdont, except now it has steroids, and by steroids I mean 80 speed, as well as an increased bulk line. The attack only changes to about 145. This difference means Swords Dance and Dragon Dance both become much more reliable and viable, because Crawdont is more capable of taking hits to set up and outspeeding things once it gets going. Other than that, pretty much the same crab. It runs the same sets as a normal crab. Finally, in my slot 6, we have Delta Grottle, a water and ground type not fully evolved Pokemon with Water Absorb that takes use of its Eviolite as well as access to Shore Up to be a powerful physical tank. But that's not all. Now that we've gone over all of my team's members, we can go over the one new Pokemon on my opponent's side, Mega Delta Venusaur. It's like base form Mega Venusaur, but rock candy flavored. It's Psychic and Fairy type, with the new ability Hubris, which is a special equivalent of Moxie. It is just as annoying as a regular Mega Venusaur is. It's just flavored differently. You maintain things like Leech Seed and a 50% recovery move affected by a weather condition, in this case Moonlight, but the stabs change from Sludge Bomb and Giga Drain to Psychic and Moonblast. You've got a couple of options in Thunderbolt and Calm Mind, as well as the whole Hubris thing. It has Regenerator in its base form, but that does not come into play over the course of this game, although it is very notable for times where a Pokemon remains in base form before it gets Mega Evolving. Regardless, let's get into the actual matchup. First thing I saw, Spectrier and Ogerpon are awful. My two ghost resistances are Crawdont and Wigglytuff. Crawdont doesn't really want to take Will-O-Wisps, and Wigglytuff doesn't actually kill Spectrier, because after a nasty plot, Draining Kiss out-heals what Wigglytuff can do, which is a bit of a major issue. Ogerpon, on the other hand, my primary way of taking fire moves is in the form of Delta Grottle, who gets one shot by a grass move, and Delta Snorlax, whose Thick Fat gets broken through by Mold Breaker. It's not a very fun time. However, pretty much the rest of the team is extremely handleable. I'll have to dance around Mega Venusaur, but everyone has to do that anyway. And the three on the left, Palafin, Iron Hands, and Regieleki, all get checked by Delta Grottle, while I can take on most of the rest with Skarmory. The next thing I ended up seeing is my opponent's limited sustainability. Venusaur is the only real user of a recovery move on this team. It very much relies on its grassy terrain in order to actually keep its squad healthy, a terrain which I can override. Fourth end. Where are the hazards? There are no hazards on this team. Not a Spiker or a Stealth Rocker in sight. And the only removal mon is Regieleki. Petrarunt may learn Toxic Spikes, but they never actually came up in the battle. I have some kind of a speed advantage. If we remove Regieleki from the equation, because due to my actually competent ground type, well, 2 ground types, as well as other electric immunity and extremely tanky electric resistance, we can safely eliminate Regieleki from any form of consideration. With that in mind, between Zeraora and Sneasler in terrain, I have a massive speed advantage over my opponent's team. Sort of. The Scarfers become a problem here. And finally, bulking it out absolutely works. Skarmory and Delta Grottle, who I often refer to as Goddle, can take a lot of swings from this opponent's roster. But then we have to get into the prep. I normally prepare by putting all 9 Pokemon in a paste and then trimming down to get something. So the teams that I present are in pick order rather than actual I thought of these first order. First off, we've got Hydreigon, running a Choice Scarf mixed set with Hyper Voice, Earth Power, U-Turn, and Return. Return is only for Mega Venusaur's potential Calm Mind variants, but I figured the stab options do very well at taking on this team's coverage. The stab options do very well at taking on this team's defensive typings, and a Choice Scarf just allows me to outspeed everything that I can. Ogerpon is kind of a problem, so I didn't want to be slower than that. Second mon is Zeraora. Speaking of not being slower than Ogerpon, we have something that is completely walled by it, because I'm a contradictory little prick. Volt Switch and Taunt are largely just throwaway moves. This Pokemon's going to be clicking Plasma Fists 9 times out of 10 unless it is staring down Iron Hands, but in reality it's just here to be a reasonable glue poke that makes me sweat a lot less than I otherwise would. Third member is Delta Snorlax, being fat. I don't have to run thick fat because the only fire type here has Mold Breaker and there's no ice. Synthesis and Bulk Up form the core of the set, allowing me to 1v1 Ogerpon if I can bulk up as it comes in. Seed Bomb is just the adaptability stab. Rock Slide hits Ogerpon the hardest, and I don't really care about hitting Rillaboom for that much damage because it's not doing anything back to me. Petrarunt is a problem, but that's what the rest of the team is for. Skarmory, Akaberry. Brave Bird actually kills Ogerpon, and since there's no removal, spiking is a fairly safe option. I don't exactly know why I ended up putting 84 speed EVs and Toxic on this. I don't remember why I put 84 speed EVs on them. I was likely creeping to Venusaur, but it never ended up mattering. For next up, we have Delta Grottle. I mentioned this thing countered Palafin. I was right. Shore Up is the primary healing option. Stealth Rock is very spammable. Dragon Tail is here to take on the taunt bulk up variants of Palafin that often will try to break through these waters. If it uses Substitute, I'm shit out of luck. But that's just what we have to go with. And finally, Tapu Lele, the reason why I'm not shit out of luck against sub bulk up Palafin. Because Psychic Terrain blocks Jet Punch, this thing actually becomes an incredible Palafin answer as long as I don't get Wave Crashed, which is what Grottle is for. Finally, we go into Team Preview and I see, bam! Look at all of this stuff. As we slide in the other members of the team. Looking at this Team Preview immediately, my first instinct is lead off with Skarmory, because Regieleki is not here, and therefore there is no removal. So let's get right into the game. I may pause it at certain instances. I prefer to have it on fast. Flip turn onto Skarmory, go back to Petrarunt, spike number 1, no removal. Here comes a parting shot from Petrarunt, likely not caring, pretty much. A second spike. Iron Hands is kind of a problem, so it's Grottle time. Swords Dance is even more of a problem, so it's phasing time. As much as I'd love to get up my rocks here, I wasn't chancing too close combats taking my Grottle down. But luckily, +2 Drain Punch still doesn't 2-hit KO because Grottle is awesome. I finally managed to get my rocks up on turn... No, I don't get them on turn 5. I just heal. I almost forgot about that. Skarmory comes back in on Rillaboom as I don't take a knockoff or even a U-turn. It goes for Grassy Glide rather than explicitly having a mid-ground. I was in voice call with my opponent during the course of this game, so I did learn that not only did they not prepare for Grotle at all, they also vastly underprepared for Skarmory. A grave mistake. Grassy Terrain bumps my Seed Bomb up to doing 30% to Venusaur. That is a typically bulky Venusaur. Protect on a Leech Seed variant. Can't say that's something I've seen on Mega Delta Venusaur before, but it's just one of those things that we have to work with. Ogerpon finally finds its way in on turn 11, and here's where we have to start dancing. I expected to take a Cudgel here, but a Horn Leech for Hydreigon into Horn Leech for 47 is totally fine, and a knockout with Hyper Voice off of my Choice Scarf makes things so much easier for the rest of this game as I start to close the jaws of control. Grotle finally manages to get its Stealth Rock up on turn 15, and now I'm just pretty much going to sit back for the rest of the game and let my hazards carry me to victory. A Fake Out on Rillaboom made absolutely no sense as I brought up to my opponent in the voice call, but, you know, sometimes you have to work with what you're working with, and I don't think my opponent really prepared for this game to the extent that they would have needed to in order to actually take it home. Yeah, spoiler alert, this game is not lost. My apologies. But even at this spot on turn 20, I could pretty much tell I was not losing this game. Venusaur pulls off a Rest instead of going for Moonlight, a very strange play in my book, but one I am happy to exploit due to the fact that Venusaur had revealed all 4 moves at the time. An Earth Power and Iron Hands cleanly knocks that out. Grotle comes in on Palafin, taking a Jet Punch like a champion for literally 0 damage. And as Rillaboom comes back in, I whiff a Dragon Tail. Nards. It's totally fine. I didn't need it to win anyway. And now Skarmory's taking a U-turn. Pecharunt is going to take another 37% of its health, heal up with its Black Sludge, and I start realizing, hey, I don't actually need to switch out of this with Skarmory, even though I have no special defense investment whatsoever. The Hexes only do 41, and after seeing that it's Hex instead of Shadow Ball, I'm like, okay, only 15 more Hexes to go. But I finally go to Hydreigon after forcing a Hex out, knock an Earth Power, and watch Venusaur come in, get absolutely ravaged by hazards, and normally take those Earth Powers pretty decently, but with the hazard chip and the fact that it was asleep, nothing's really taking that very well. Palafin walks back in, it goes to 1, I let Grotle take care of it, because Grotle is an awesome Pokemon. Do not underestimate this little fellow. There is a reason he got drafted before Lele Sneasler. Rillaboom comes back in, it's Skarmory time. Skarmory takes pretty much negative damage from that attack. I know I'm still out of range of Hex, so it's just time to get my health on. As Skarmory stays on in, I have very little reason to not just make this a 6-0 victory, so that's pretty much what I intended on doing. I force a Hex, I get my Roost, and then I believe this is the turn 36, where Skarmory finally dips out, Tapu Lele comes in, takes a Hex, doesn't like it, but does manage to eat it, and with 1 Psychic, fells the Pecharunt, and Rillaboom falls soon after. That was week 2 of the Wet n Wild Draft League. I will see you all in the next one.